In Part 1, we stripped away the language of development and asked what Abusera Airport City really means on Oromo land. In Part 2, we tested the project's own legal cover and found that paper. Compliance could not conceal lived dispossession. Now, in Part 3, we turn to the force that so often speaks louder than both land and law: money. Because this project is not moving forward on bulldozers alone. It is moving through loans, guarantees, financiers, and deals made far from the people expected to pay the price. So now, we follow the money, because that is where the true design of Abusera reveals itself. Who profits, who pays, who is liable. Every megaproject follows a simple rule. If you want to understand its real logic, follow the money. Because behind the language of development, behind environmental assessments and national pride, there is a financial architecture that decides whose lives are protected and whose are expendable. Abusera Airport City is no exception. 15. The financial architecture of Abusera. The Abusera Airport City, rebranded in official discourse as Bishoftu International Airport and Airport City, is now actively moving from planning to implementation as one of Ethiopia's largest infrastructure projects in history. Estimated costs have converged around USD 10–12.5 billion, depending on design scope and the inclusion of ancillary airport city components such as logistics hubs, hotels, and commercial zones. At the center of this financial edifice is a layered, risk-stacked financing structure, tailored to attract global capital while insulating key stakeholders from downside risk. First, equity and initial funding. Ethiopian Airlines Group, EAG, provides the initial equity and project sponsorship. This contribution, estimated in the hundreds of millions of dollars, is directed toward early design, land acquisition, and preparatory earthworks. Ethiopian Airlines has earmarked domestic capital, 30 billion birr for land clearing and relocation efforts, and political support for the site in Abusera under its strategic Vision 2040 growth framework. Government guarantees play a crucial role. Public land transfers, sovereign backing, export facilitation agreements, and political risk mitigation create the perception of state support without immediate direct budgetary expenditure. This structure shifts first loss exposure from lenders to the sovereign, with the state effectively underwriting risk without upfront disbursement. Second is multilateral lead arrangement. The African Development Bank, AFDB, has signed a mandate letter positioning itself as the initial mandated lead arranger, IMLA, and global coordinator for financing. AFDB has committed an anchor loan of USD 500 million and is charged with mobilizing the bulk USD 8 billion of external debt financing from a consortium of lenders. AFDB's role is not merely as a funder, but as risk architect. Its involvement reduces perceived political and credit risk, allowing commercial banks, export credit agencies, institutional investors, and other multilateral development banks to participate under a structured risk framework. Coordinated financing will likely draw on export credit agencies, ECAs, from creditor countries, commercial syndicated loans, pension funds, infrastructure debt funds, global institutional investors, and domestic banking institutions. FDB's AAA credit rating and multilateral status are central to de-risking the project for these actors. The third layer is commercial and institutional leverage. Commercial banks and international institutional investors participate through syndicated debt tranches, often secured or guaranteed by AFDB and backed by sovereign partial guarantees from Ethiopia. Export credit agencies, such as those from Europe, the United States, Japan, or China, provide guarantees or tied loans to incentivize procurement of national services and materials from their jurisdictions. This spreads risk to national treasuries rather than Ethiopian public finances. Institutional investors, infrastructure funds, pension assets, and sovereign wealth funds are courted with structured returns anchored to projected airport revenues, cargo and logistics fees, and ancillary commercial real estate yields. And finally, public sector absorption of risk. The overarching pattern is clear. Financiers transfer downside risk upward, while social, environmental, and cultural risks are offloaded downward. If the project fails financially, the Ethiopian public bears the losses through eventual service of sovereign guarantees, currency risk exposure, and consequent austerity measures to pay off the structured debt. If the project succeeds, financial returns concentrate with Ethiopian Airlines through equity appreciation, multilateral lenders through debt service and structuring fees, and private investors through coupon yields, equity kicks, and potential secondary market gains. This asymmetry of exposure is foundational to contemporary megaproject finance. Institutionalized risk layering protects capital while social and environmental risk is externalized to host communities. 16. Development, finance, and the illusion of neutrality. Development finance institutions, DFIs, often claim neutrality and developmental intent, but their operational mandates, governance structures, and capital incentives tell a different story. Unpacking the key participants and their mandates in this project is here important. African Development Bank, EFDB, positions infrastructure lending as a pathway to regional integration, connectivity, and economic transformation. Its mandate combines development economics with strategic mobilization of private capital. AFDB is incentivized to structure large projects as flagship achievements that demonstrate impact metrics and catalyze follow-on finance. U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, DFC, and similar agencies from other high-income countries participate by offering political risk insurance, partial credit guarantees, and direct loans that focus on bankability and return metrics, not solely social impact. Export credit agencies, ECAs, function primarily to support domestic exporters by underwriting foreign project risk, effectively shifting the capital cost risk to the host nation, Ethiopia, while assuring foreign contractors and suppliers of repayment. These institutions are governed by binding environmental and social safeguards, not marketing narratives. Among standard requirements are early and meaningful consultation with affected communities, avoidance of involuntary displacement where feasible, livelihood restoration and compensation plans, recognition and respect for indigenous land tenure systems, operational grievance mechanisms. When these conditions are overlooked or inadequately implemented, financiers are not passive. They become legally and reputationally exposed to breach claims under their own safeguard policies. This undermines the narrative that DFIs are neutral adjudicators of development merit. 17. Risk transfer as development strategy. The financing model of Abusera Airport City is intentionally arranged so that political risk is ensured through DFI risk-sharing agreements and sovereign backing. Currency risk is hedged or absorbed by the state, given Ethiopia's ongoing foreign exchange constraints and managed float regime. Investor returns are protected via structured debt seniority, partial guarantees, and revenue-backed instruments. What is not insured or hedged, however, is social risk, displacement and loss of livelihoods among Oromo farming communities in central Oromia, cultural and identity loss tied to ancestral lands, environmental degradation and water rights conflicts, pressures on pastoralism, agriculture, and local economies. These social costs are internalized by local communities, not by financiers or project designers. This represents a broader structural pattern in global development finance. Human and environmental risk are offloaded to the most vulnerable actors. Resettlement plans are underway, but the adequacy of compensation, livelihood restoration, and participatory consent mechanisms remains contested, especially in the face of customary land tenure systems that are not fully recognized under Ethiopian law. 18. Debt, austerity, and the false promise of megaprojects. Ethiopia is currently navigating one of the most difficult sovereign debt trajectories in its recent history. The nation defaulted on its USD 1 billion Eurobond following a missed coupon payment in December 2023. Debt restructuring is underway under the G20's Common Framework, aiming to reduce debt service obligations by approximately USD 2.5 to 3.5 billion through 2028. A formal agreement in principle with official creditors has been reached, though private bondholders have been reluctant to accept principal haircuts, arguing the issue is liquidity rather than solvency. Despite macroeconomic strain, including currency depreciation, subsidy reductions, and cuts in public services, the state continues to marshal capital for mega infrastructure, signaling political choice over economic necessity. The rationale is visibility and geopolitical signaling. Large flagship projects like Abusera Airport City are showcased as markers of modernization and global connectivity. Even as structural crises in export performance, public service funding, and debt sustainability persist. This juxtaposition exposes a persistent dilemma. Prestige infrastructure does not inherently deliver food security, equitable growth, or poverty reduction. Instead, it can amplify financial fragility, deepen social displacement, and entrench uneven development outcomes. Overall, to follow the money in Abusera Airport City is to see a global coalition of financiers, development banks, export credit agencies, and institutional investors whose interests lie in structured returns and risk mitigation. Behind the glossy rhetoric of connectivity and development lies a financial architecture that protects capital and externalizes social risk. For the farmers, pastoralists, and smallholders of central Oromia, the question is not whether development is desirable, but whose development, and at what human cost. For the state and financiers, Abusera is a bet on global connectivity. For the communities at its core, it is a question of survival, rights, and equitable inclusion in the development process.